and welcome to another episode of African News Review. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me, as usual, come to be enamored by, the presence, two of Africa's most brilliant minds. I'll start with my sister, Fubara Eneli Esquire, author Your Self-Love Revolution, host Rethinking Freedom, and co-host of Women and Resistance, which you can see on this channel every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And the man needs no introduction, but introduce we shall. He is Comrade Milton Allimadi, host Black Star News, and author of Manufacturing Hate, How the West Demonized Africa. Shortly, the book should be getting an update.
Yes.
And yes, so greetings, and welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Comrade Asante.
Okay. Thank you. And as it has become custom, we'll take news from where you're at. It's a news show after all. So starting with Sister. News, where you at, please.
Well, we are reeling where we are. Feels like we are in some kind of twilight zone. While the would-be dictator, the felon-in-chief, the adjudicated sexual, what is it, predator,
35
is hosting
34
a party. The theme of which was the Great Gatsby. People, millions of families went without
yesterday
their monthly payouts that enabled them to put food on their table. This included elderly people. This included people with disabilities. This included children. This included people who work for a living but are paid so little that they are the working poor. They still need assistance to be able to eat. And Congress under Mike Johnson have had 6 weeks of paid leave. And while the Democratic House of Representatives, that the Democrats have been showing up to work and trying to figure out, some kind of way to negotiate a solution to this. The Republicans have not shown up in DC, and they're also not holding town halls or anything in their hometowns either. Yeah. So they've just basically been on vacation on taxpayers' dime. And while all of this is happening on social media platforms, I am seeing people castigate the poor for being poor and say nothing, virtually nothing, about the oligarchs for whom these tax cuts are being, that these tax cuts are pretty much being done to give them, all of these healthcare and cuts are being done in order to give them more tax cuts. And no one seems to have a problem with billionaires getting more yachts or getting more money while the less to do suffer more. So it's really interesting how people are turning on their neighbors, turning on the poor, and giving the rich a pass. And that's what's happening in my neck of the woods.
Wow. Well, hopefully soccer comes to the impacted sooner rather than later. Yeah, comrade?
Comrade, you're echoing. I don't know why.
Can you hear me?
No, you're echoing. All right. You're echoing, but so anyway, Sister already summarized the big national issue that's going on. But as I see it, it's part of a bigger process. This country, I think, beginning of the decline of the empire, You know, the British Empire had its long run. I think the American Empire has also had its long run. And now the contradictions are being played out. And ultimately, it's going to be a contest between the ruling elite. And by the way, that to me, my estimation, and that also includes the Democrats and Republicans. I think if this country really has an opportunity to evolve, it's going to be the type of politics that we're seeing being played out in New York City right now, where a candidate came to one of the wealthiest cities in the world and said, let's not pretend we cannot survive with this wealth inequity. And people thought he was crazy. And he was at 10%. And now he's on the verge of being mayor. It would not even be a close contest had Capitol and the oligarchs not lined up against him, selecting and endorsing a candidate who's had multiple accusations, serious allegations
of sexual impropriety,
of sexually harassing women. And they would prefer to replace him, have him rather as the mayor, than somebody who's saying, let's stop pretending. The wealth inequity is unsustainable. And if this country is to endure for longer, it needs to adopt the kind of politics that New York is seeing played out. And the other thing that caught my attention, of course, was that the Democrats want to bring Prince Andrew to testify, to talk about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And obviously, if that were to happen, that would be quite very interesting in terms of what he would be able to reveal. Maybe King Charles can give him a nudge and say, we might give you a slightly bigger house if you go and just speak the truth. Yeah. So I hope that happens.
Okay,
what are the chances that the plane bringing him over here will explode over the Atlantic?
Let's not say that, but nothing is impossible. Yep.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Go
ahead. Good segue. Actually, the news here is the gentleman you refer to as Prince Andrew is no longer Prince Andrew, but simply Andrew Mountbatten of Windsor.
Okay. So I stand corrected, right?
And to further, cut him off, the king has removed his military titles as well this morning. So he's effectively a commoner, but he's living at the king's mercy.
Wait a second, didn't he earn his military titles?
Well, you can, but you serve at the pleasure of His Majesty. So King Charles III, and long may he rule over us. And
rule over you.
Well. We can't say you can't undermine the.
Yeah, listen, you're
the
in the
monarchy.
UK. I don't want ICE to come and get you, so please say what you need to say.
No, I mean, ours is going to be, you don't want to be quartered. So you want to, be a good commoner, as we are all are. So that's it. There was one other news that caught my eye, but I mean, we'll lead into that in the course of our running a story. So for the first one, we start in Sudan. And it is that the hundreds, according to The Guardian, hundreds were reportedly killed at Sudanese hospital as evidence of RSF atrocities mounts. RSF support forces, which claims control of El Fasher, on Sunday reportedly killed at least 460 people in cold blood. A bit of the story goes, the rapid support forces killed hundreds of patients and staff inside a hospital in El Fasher, according to the World Health Organization and the Sudan Doctors Network, after the paramilitary group claimed control of the city on Sunday. The WHO Secretary General, Tedros Ghebreyesus, said he was appalled and deeply shocked at the report of more than 460 had been killed at the Saudi maternity hospital without assigning blame in a post on X. And this thought was further echoed by the Sudanese Doctors Network. So your thoughts when you read the story, well, what did you make of it? I'll go with sister
All right. You
first,
want me to
being
go
that
first?
I'll go with sister first. It's a maternity ward. And
Okay.
the fact that 460 people were sent to the great beyond in a maternity ward is very chilling, to say the least.
So this is definitely not what I thought African News Review would be about, but for the second week in a row, seems like I need to start my comments with just pouring libation for my people.
Mm.
We only have an hour for this show. If you can think of what takes a person to a maternity ward, the idea of the continuation of life, the happiness, the joy, sometimes the fear, the concern, maybe things aren't going exactly as anticipated. The sense that you're in a place that should be a place of safety, where your needs will be catered to. Families who have finally gotten their loved ones there, expecting that they will receive the care necessary. People at home are preparing to receive mother and child. And for this Janjaweed, these absolute cowards, these haters of African people, I hesitate to use any other words because I don't want to strip any human of their humanity, because once we do that, then we can become as barbaric as they. To go into this place and to attack people in just a state of absolute vulnerability, and see that as a mark of power. To cut off the life of a child before they even get a chance to be what they came on earth to be. If there is a hell, there is a very special place for these particular people. And for all our new ancestors, all our premature ancestors, I pour this water for them right now, and I say Ashe. As their tears, as their blood, blood so thick that it can be seen from satellites in the sky. My goodness. I say Ashe. Their lives and their death will not be in vain. Ashe. Yeah, so what do I think about this? Man, it ties into every story that we're going to cover today, every story that we've been covering since at least I've been a part of A.N.R. and I think since probably you started, and everybody who's covered every story on Africa. To the extent that we have been blessed in the way that we have with the minerals, with the resources that we have, there are always these external powers that are complicit in trying to extract from us. And there's always going to be this violence that is going to be imposed upon us as they try to extract everything that they can from us. So in this particular story, you look at the role of the UAE, you look at the role of Egypt, the role of Saudi Arabia, the role of Russia, the role of Western private interests, whether it's the Wagner group, whatever different groups they call, the groups that are supplying the arms, the intelligence, those buying the gold from through RSF and all of these different mercenaries, the Emirati firms buying the Sudanese gold through these RSF channels. And it's just more of this resource capture, more of this neo-colonial extraction. We know that this is a country rich with gold, gum, Arabic, the oil, the fertile land, and all of these global actors who will not leave us alone. But it's also these Arabs, who are just intent on exterminating the more quote unquote African elements in this country. And then it's also the tragedy of the Pan-African project, of the African Union, the betrayal of African unity, the fragmentation that allows all of these external factors to continue to play on our countries in the way that they are. And we're going to see it as we look at all the other stories that we're going to cover today. The local elites, the warlords who are also benefiting. The Hamidite people, the Burhan who are controlling these vast business empires. And then we look at, you know what? I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna let brother say what he needs to add to this. I'm overwhelmed with grief.
Yeah.
And I don't have any immediate answers as to how we stop this anytime soon, because it does not appear that we have the courage as Africans to come together to fight this. And there is no appeal to outside forces that will bring about any peace here, because it is not in their interest for there to be peace. It is absolutely in their interest for there to be continued chaos in these areas.
Yes. Well, I mean, what else is there to be said? What you've not highlighted? The neo-colonial aspects, the elite capture of the state, the internal fragmentation of supposedly a body of people. I mean, Darfur is the size of Germany. Just Darfur. We're not even talking about Sudan. So imagine that side of a country that has been turned on its head. So, comrade, you wanted to add?
Yeah, okay. So, at the end of the day, this is on us as African people. But I'm happy to say that at least the process is ongoing. All of these things are interconnected. The young people are fighting to take control away from the neo-colonial leaders, and I think they will prevail. So, we've had coup d'etats in Africa in the past, historically, but the ones that we are seeing recently, these are qualitatively very different. Sadly and tragically, we're going to have a few more situations like this as things sort themselves out in Africa. It's not going to be limited to Sudan alone. So you have Tanzania, for example. That's a powder keg. So you have a situation where Africans are being slaughtered in Sudan, but the priority of Samia Suluhu in Tanzania is to steal elections and impose herself. So that's why these leaders are completely morally bankrupt to be leading any African country. Instead of saying, okay, we don't need any conflict right now in Tanzania. We have urgent situations where our sisters, brothers, children are being killed in Sudan. Let me release all the opposition leaders. Let's talk. Let's have true elections in this country because we cannot afford to have a Tanzania become like a Sudan. You see? And let's address our energies and talents toward resolving situations such as Sudan. But when you have leaders whose priority is to maintain power, like her, like Paul Biya, all these guys, it just shows you the disconnect. How can you be the leader of an African country? And you see how the conflict in Sudan, where you have two branches of the elite, the military are the elite, and now have the racialized component. And you African leaders, you are commander-in-chiefs of military forces, and you're just standing by and watching this slaughter happen. And you talk about international community. What does that mean? When you say international community, you're referring to Europeans, right? Yeah. You're always appealing to them. The same folks that are still using divide and rule, right? Yeah. So that's why I say all of these leaders just deserve to be removed. Let the young people seize power. Let them make their own mistakes. Their own mistakes cannot be as bad as what we are seeing in a lot of these African countries right now. So, for example, why are we seeing the conflict in the Sudan, first of all? Because there was a transition led by the young people in Sudan that was going to result in civilian rule by young people. But the leader of the National Army and the leader of the Janjaweed, General Burhan versus General Hemeti, decided to fight it out. So in the background, it means all this time they had been contesting as who is going to be on top, and they never took that process of civilian transition seriously. So let me add one other point. Why was the massacre occurring in Fasher in the first place? Because the National Army abandoned Fasher. Think about that. They abandoned. They just, with their aircrafts, with their helicopters, with their armored personnel, just decided to withdraw. So what could be the purpose? Were they inviting the massacre to happen so that they can then look better and gain the moral high ground? It's so immoral that it is unfathomable, but not surprising. As I said, in each and every one of these countries, we need the young people to come to power. Get rid of all these folks,
But while we're talking about the young people coming to power, and we saw this in the Liberian Civil War as well, we're looking at the recruitment of children fighters. We're looking at Colombian mercenaries that are being hired and brought into Sudan, who are coming with a whole different mindset in terms of how they fight and how they're massacring people and how they're recruiting and training Sudanese children to just kill and maim and sexually abuse their own. And so on so many levels, the entire world is on fire. I mean, I know that with our focus, we're focusing on Africa, but of course, everything is interconnected. When we look at what's happening with the buildup in the Caribbean and how this man seems to want to start a war in the Caribbean, and it's going to, of course, affect Black people in the diaspora. We need to be concerned about what is happening across the board, and to what extent do we have an international community, and are any of these communities working, whether it's the African Union or whether it's the United Nations. Like, it just seems all of these entities are asleep at the wheel. But there are actors, BlackRock, Wagner Group, all of these stateless entities that are nonetheless wielding an incredible amount of power and destabilizing countries and ruining lives. So that the number of people who've been displaced from El Fasher and then the number of people who have been killed, it is absolutely mind-boggling. And yet life continues, just like here in the US. We're talking about millions of people not having access to food, and other people are partying. Halloween continued as usual, and nothing seems to faze us as human beings anymore. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me.
Speaking of mind-boggling, we go to Tanzania, where what can we say?
Yep, absolutely.
It's
I can give you my prediction. She's not going to survive.
It's that, according to
It's a matter of time, but she won't survive. It's a matter of time, but she won't survive.
According to Bloomberg, Tanzania ends internet blackout as election unrest persists. And it reads, Tanzania authorities lifted an internet blackout on Thursday, a day after it was imposed to try and quell riots that broke out as the country voted in presidential and parliamentary elections. There she is, Samia Suluhu Hassan, the president of, the 65-year-old president of Tanzania. President Samia sought a second term in the election and is almost guaranteed of victory because her main opponent, Tundu Lissu, who had been detained and is facing trial on treason charges, was barred from running and was the second largest opposition, and so was the second largest opposition candidate. Opposition supporters took to the streets en masse on Wednesday to protest their exclusion. Dar es Salaam, the capital of Tanzania, is home to an important port used by Africa's top two copper producers, Zambia and Democratic Republic of Congo, and any deterioration in the security situation in the city risk for disrupting trade in the metal and the import of fuel and other goods destined for the two landlocked countries. There's a key part here. I mean, it goes into what she won in terms of the election. So that's, but this is the key part here. Tanzania's first female leader, Hassan, is expected to preside over the rollout of a long-delayed $42 billion liquefied natural gas facilities that Shell PLC, A.N.R AS, and ExxonMobil Corp are helping develop during her second term. Her new administration is also set to make major investments in power plants, ports, and railways to attract more foreign investments. I mean, the fact that this news is highlighted in Bloomberg, which is a money paper, what do we read into that? I mean, you could add the commentary of the elections as well, which by all accounts is a foregone conclusion. She is going to return to power. So, comrade.
No, she's already been declared the winner.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, what's your take? I mean, you've said she won't last. You might want to change your stance or maintain same.
Okay, so let me address first the first part of the question that you asked. You read the terms about the finances. And yes, of course, that's what they are primarily interested in. So they're saying is that, okay, the election is now over. Now we need stability so that we can preserve all these lucrative projects that she's working on. That's what they're saying. So this to me is what you call wishful thinking, and I go back to what I said in the beginning. All of these things are connected. You have a continent where the median age is 19 years old, right?
Yes.
And then you have countries where unemployment is up to 50%. Do you really think these young people care what Bloomberg is saying? Of course not. They're unemployed and they need and they want and they deserve immediate solutions, right?
Yeah.
And the immediate solutions are not there. Because even if young people came to power, it's going to be a process of reorienting their relationship with the West. The relationship that Africa has with the West now has been solidified over many decades, over a century, you see? So for young people to change that relationship, it's not going to be easy. That's why in West Africa, it took 3 countries to decide that from now on, we're going to act collectively for them to survive this long. And of course, I'm talking about Alliance of Sahel States, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger.
Yeah.
They could not have gone individually. In fact, when Niger kicked out French and said they're going to take control of their uranium, they got a 2-week ultimatum, you see? But the French did not realize they had thought in advance of the consequences and how will we deal with the consequences. They've been there for 2 years now because immediately after the French gave them the ultimatum, using ECOWAS as the mouthpiece, these countries said an attack on any one of us is an attack on all three of us. You see? And that's why the invasion never happened. That's why now we are reading about them taking control of the gold industry, wanting to do the smelting and the production locally. And that's the kind of conversation that more African countries need to be engaged in, right? Obviously, when Bloomberg writes like that, they're confident that Suluhu would prevail and remain in the neo-colonial orbit, which of course, you keep doing the same thing. What is the same? Right? Yeah. That's a definition of insanity, right?
Insanity, correct, yeah.
So we need change in all these countries. We need change in Tanzania. And in Tanzania, which is more known for people being too laid back. You see? When people are too laid back, sometimes people underestimate them. So all the whole continent was shaken up when they saw the ferocity of the protests in Tanzania. And I don't think they're going to go back to just folding their hands and let Suluhu do what she wants to do. I think her power is going to deteriorate. There could be intervention. There could be another election. There could be an intervention from the armed forces. But I think business as usual in Tanzania is over.
Okay. Sister?
My heart breaks. My heart breaks for my people. I'm ready for a happy story from Africa. Most Tanzanians, we know, live under very precarious situations. We know that over 70% live under subsistence agriculture or informal trade. They are not benefiting from any of these royalties from their resources. We know that inflation and youth unemployment is beyond 50%. So if you can just imagine that. We know that foreign firms and the local elites are capturing the surpluses, but the country's debt continues to rise.
Correct.
We know that under Nyerere, when he had the education for self-reliance, that they did have quantum leaps in terms of education, but that today their public schools face overcrowding, they have teacher shortages, there's underfunding for schools, and their public education has actually really floundered, and it's really now about private education that is expanding, but serving mostly the urban elites and reinforcing inequality. We know that less than 2% of their GDP goes towards healthcare. And while the urban hospitals get support from donors and, the oil companies and things like that, that in the rural areas, they don't have that kind of support.
Inequality.
But let me say this about Tanzania and all of our African countries. If my house is polluted with, let me just say, smallpox, and I move out, but my house is not thoroughly cleansed, disinfected, completely, they do whatever they need to do to make sure that the smallpox is cleaned out, completely eradicated. Anybody who moves into my house is most likely going to get infected.
Correct.
And what I'm seeing across Africa is that after colonial rule, we inherited a corrupted form of governance. So I don't quite frankly care who we elect, or whether it's military or civilian or whatever rule. Once they embrace that same corrupted system, governance system, they are automatically corrupted. I mean, we're going to see that in one of the stories that you're going to cover next with Manchester. Whether it was Nkrumah, whether it was Banda, whether it was Kenyatta, whether it was any Awolowo, any of them, once they got into power, into this corrupted system, where the white people had already put in place a system that was about extracting goods. It wasn't about serving the people. It wasn't about building up the people.
It was about
It was about extraction and taking it to the West. That's what we have. And so all of our leaders just come in and they are corrupted all the same. Now, what act will it require to say, you know what? This is a beautiful edifice. It's the only edifice we can remember because we have forgotten what governing systems we had before. But we're going to burn this thing down, even though we are so wanting to look like our masters. I mean, because what do we talk about when we talk about looking civilized? Oh, do we look like Dubai? Do we look like Paris? Those places are bastions of death, built on the blood and the sweat and the bodies of your people. So the only way you can replicate that on your land is on the blood and the sweat and the bodies of your people, which means we have to totally abandon that concept. But if we're educated by them, and if that is what we think makes us look civilized, we are bound to keep going around this particular mountain till we extinguish ourselves. So back to Tanzania and my sister, we thought if we get women now in position that women are going to come in with a different mindset, but not, you know what? As a woman, I've got to say women get into that house and they get corrupted as well. I don't know what else to say, y'all. I don't know what else to say. Yes.
I mean, I would just like to say,
and the global factors keep playing. Yes. They would like to keep that one party rule. Yes. 98% of the votes. Really? Seriously? Yeah, because let's not have any dissension and let's not have anybody vying for office, because then we only have to deal with one party. And as long as you better believe she's getting kickbacks and whoever else we got to oil there, we got to keep them going. But we can pay just that one party and we're extracting whatever we need to extract. African people, we got to wake up. That's all I have to say. We have to wake up. And it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be fun, but we have to do it.
Well, speaking of waking up, we need a president to stay awake. And for that, we go to Cameroon. And the news is that this president doesn't seem to know how to lose. According to the BBC, the BBC says the 92-year-old president who never loses, Paul Biya, to absolutely no one's surprise, Cameroon Constitutional Council has proclaimed the re-election of 92-year-old President Paul Biya, the world's oldest head of state, for an 8th successful term. Amid rumor of a close result and claims of victory by his main challenger, former government minister Issa Bakari, excitement and tension had been building in run-up to Monday's declaration. Hopes for a shock result were briefly raised. Consequently, despite it being part of a long-term pattern, the official outcome, victory for Biya, with 53.7% ahead of Mr. Bakri's on 25.2%, came as a disappointment and an anticlimax for many Cameroonians. With extended stays abroad, habitually at the Intercontinental Hotel in Geneva, or alternatively more discreet locations around the Swiss lakeside city, has reportedly triggered speculation about the extent to which he's actually governing Cameroon, or whether most decisions were in fact taken by Prime Minister and ministers or the influential Secretary General of the Presidency, Ferdinand Ngo. Are we surprised, or what do we make of this election result? I don't even know what to say. Comrade.
All right. So I read initially. I didn't know whether it was an article or what. So I wrote it, and then I said, no, wait a minute. Even by the standards of the BBC, this is exceeding the level of corruption that I'm accustomed to.
Oh, God.
So I said, let me go to the very end of this article because it was a bit too blatant. And then I realized it was actually an op-ed piece. So when they don't, when it's not appropriate for them to
comment,
reveal all the biases completely, they invite somebody to do an op-ed so that it's somebody else's byline. So they have some sort of like plausible deniability. So then it made sense because initially I said, okay, let me get ready to respond to the BBC immediately. You know, this is completely out of whack. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, this is too blatant. It doesn't sound like an article. This has to be an opinion piece. And then I went to the end and then I realized, yes, it was an opinion piece from this guy from Chatham House. So this is actually a much more blatant version of what Bloomberg was doing for Tanzania. It's like it reads actually like a press release, you know, written by the Minister of Information in Cameroon. And now I wonder, you know, this European guy who wrote this is at Chatham House. I would want to explore further his relationship with the government of Cameroon or officials of Cameroon. It was so explicit. I mean, first of all, you say, okay, so basically telling us that even though this guy is 92, this guy is probably asleep all the time. You're saying the guy offers a balancing act. Balancing act at 92. Balancing what? Between the parts of the country that is Anglophone and the parts of the country that is Francophone. So the minute I saw that, I said, okay, this is an apologia for the Cameroon regime. And then he refers to this civil war, which has claimed tens of thousands of lives, right? Women being raped, children being killed, people being displaced. He refers to it only in one sentence as the crisis in the Anglophone part of the country.
Exactly.
My God. I mean, even by standards of propagandists, you know, good propagandists at least would make it sound a little better. One sentence, and to refer it as a quote unquote a crisis, it is beyond comprehension, even for an apologist. And then he buries what should have been the lead and what he should have explored as the very last sentence. So perhaps you could read that last sentence.
Last sentence
in this apologia at the
very,
very bottom.
Okay, very bottom. The last sentence. Okay, so for Cameroon, Biya's determination to secure an 8th presidential term has brought high risk and painful cost.
Boom. And yet he never discussed that in the entire article. It's just like like a comedian.
Paul Melly.
Yeah, so that's my comment on this article.
Okay, sister.
So hard to have any conversations on any of these articles without going back to the beginning. The very name Cameroon. What is this landmass now called Cameroon? That's not what the people call themselves. Who are these people? Right? Where did that name come from? What did the people call themselves? Do you know that this area includes the Bantu, their different linguistic landscapes, if you will? You have the Niger Congo, the Bantu people. You have the Atlantic Congo, the Fulfulde people. You have the Chadic, the Afro-Asiatic people.
Yeah.
You have the Nilo-Saharan people. You have the Ubangian people as well. You have a group of people who were colonized by Germany initially.
Yeah.
And then after World War I, they basically came and said, okay, wait a second, we're going to divide the spoils. And it was, where do you want to go? And it's like France is taking this part, and then Britain is taking this part, right? And then eventually there was even a part where it's like, okay, when Cameroon was created, which part wants to go with Nigeria and which part wants to go with Cameroon? And so you have an Anglophone speaking Cameroon, and you have a Francophone speaking Cameroon. And there were supposed to be two separate states within Cameroon. But that word Cameroon actually came from the river of prawns. And it was the Germans who first started calling Cameroon, but that's not what the people call themselves. So like, you gotta even go back to, how did all of these divisions begin?
Yeah. And the German spell there.
Go ahead.
The German spell there with a K, as opposed with a C, which is what the French now spelled it with. And also, it's important to also highlight the fact that Cameroon is one of the most diverse countries on the African. In fact, it's the most diverse. It has about maybe 402 ethnic groups speaking diverse languages from one town to the other. So again, you would expect that anybody that inherits, like you said, inherits that place, understands, brings all those people into conversation. But no, it's been power from the top down. And we begin to see all of these machinations post the First World War. That is when all of this nonsense really started. Who goes where? People were divided as if you're cutting up a slice of cake, regardless of the people's, customs, language, their run-ins with the other neighboring peoples. They were just lumped together. And so all the manifestation, in fact, with the story we've seen in Sudan, is also falls back down to colonialism.
And that is why I said we got to go back and understand the history. Because if we don't, then we turn around and say, oh, why are these Black people? Why are we always fighting each other? Why can't Africans get along? Like, it's really all been engineered to keep us at loggerheads with each other. And if we don't remember our history, we don't even begin to understand why we started fighting each other. Why we continue to fight each other, so that we can get to a point where we're like, wait a second, we don't have to fight each other. Like, these are manufactured, like we can stop. Like, we can make it, but we've got to remember, and we have to go back to a time when we said, okay, when we used to live side by side, how did we address our conflicts? What was the different way that we were able to, whether it was intermarrying, whatever it was that we did, what were the different ways that we were able to come together and work together? So having put that in context, like with any of our stories, go back and do that history. And hey, a good place to start is to go and get a copy of our brother's book, Adesoji Iginla's book, Africa Illuminated. It can get you can just get started with an understanding of some basics about the 54 nations, right? We have the same oppressors. Yes, Peggy. So now let's talk about Paul Biya, born in 1933. I know we've covered this before, but let's look at who is running Cameroon. Y'all pay attention. He's got really the one who seems to be running it, Ferdinand Ngongo, who's in his early 60s. The Secretary General of the presidency is Ferdinand Ngongo. There's a Minister of Defense who is 65. Minister of Territorial Administration is 86. The head of the National Hydrocarbons Corporation is 91. The Senate President is 85. The Speaker of the National Assembly is 90. The Chief of Police is it's crazy. It's a gerontocracy. And it's like when Brother Allimadi was talking about let the youth rule. It's like, what has happened to our elders who used to understand the concept of training the younger ones and stepping aside and being advisors? But this is what happens when you get into a corrupted system and you become corrupted yourself.
True.
So Queen Elizabeth doesn't leave till she dies, right? And Trump now has to be, you just see the system. Putin is not going to leave till he dies. And African leaders believing now, this is mine, I own it. The people don't own it. Now remember, we used to have kings, right? Obas, all of that. But the understanding was you were a steward. You worked for the people.
People, yeah.
You didn't own it, and then they were your subjects in that sense. And you answered to a higher power as well.
True.
And now it's completely different. But with Cameroon, the idea that Biya is providing some stability, and of course, I would have loved to see in this article just how much Cameroon is paying into the economy of Switzerland on an annual basis. Brother Allimadi, is there a place where we can get that figure? How much does he pay that hotel in Geneva or the other places that he stayed? How much is Cameroon paying into the coffers of Switzerland on an annual basis? I would like to know that particular information. Yes, Peggy,
right.
JD is waiting in the wings, and apparently his new first lady is going to be Erica Kirk. But time will tell.
Who?
Right. All right.
I mean, there's one thing.
Actually, the amount.
Good.
The amount he spends in Switzerland is actually probably very small compared to what France is getting for Total Energies and all those French companies. So Cameroon essentially is a French project.
Yeah.
And, of course, France prefers these old folks who have already made their tens of millions or even $1 billion, and they don't want to rock the boat. So that's the ideal, perfect state for them. But, nothing can stop a movement whose time has arrived.
True.
And I think we are seeing the second surge of revolution in Africa. The last time we had this kind of authentic revolution was 1950 to 1960s that led to independence. And of course, as you said, the very people who won the independence struggle stifled the revolution. They said, okay. They had mobilized the masses. They kicked out European, formal at least, colonialism. They got to the State House, and then they told the masses, okay, guys, now you can go home.
We'll take it from here.
They essentially disbanded the movement instead of using the momentum of that movement to say, okay, to talk to Europeans, see, my people are dissatisfied. My people want us to rearrange our economic relationship, the terms of trade with you guys. Otherwise, my people are not going to be producing any more cocoa, any more coffee, any more tea. So let's talk to my people. That would have been the strategy, right?
Yeah.
But they started the private conversations with the former colonial powers, and they were rewarded. Not a single one of them is not wealthy, except you had exceptions like Julius Nyerere, right?
Yeah.
Who didn't care, was not motivated by personal financial aggrandizement, you see? So now you have all these unemployed young people. They are on social media, so they have all this concept of how to engage in struggle. They know how young people live in other parts of the world. It is going to be very difficult to bribe them because they don't have one or two designated leaders. They can't go to Kenya and say, okay, who's the leader of the young people? Let's bribe him, right?
Yeah.
So what did they try in Kenya? They even kidnapped like 10 to 15 people they thought were the leaders of the Gen Z
movement, yeah.
uprising in Kenya. Immediately the same day, there were new young people who stepped up. So they don't realize yet that they're living at a time where they're going to be swept away. Suluhu, I thought, was much smarter. I didn't know that she would go all the way by keeping that guy locked up, and actually having a sham election when the other guy, first of all, he was disqualified because if he had been on the ballot, even from prison, he would have defeated her.
Yeah, he would have won.
He would have. So he made sure that, number one, he was locked up and he was disqualified. So you could not even vote for him. You see, very key thing. The locking up alone itself was not the major problem. Locking him up made him actually much more popular. He would have won in a landslide, but she didn't take any chances. She scratched his name, off the ballot. Yeah.
Well, the only thing I find very funny about the Paul Biya story is his link with Switzerland. Usually when people get old, they want to go and live somewhere warm. Why would you want to go and live in the cold? The last time I checked,
at least he's safe. Because at Switzerland, at least he's safe. That's what I would say.
True. Thank you very much. Yes. The neutral status of Switzerland was how the Nazis were able to, cut away some of their wealth. And yes, we continue to. True. Yeah. For the final story, this actually forms probably a history lesson in itself. It's called the Radical Manchester Event, and it comes from the BBC. And for those who don't know, that is Jomo Kenyatta in his younger days, the first president of the Republic of Kenya in 1964, who would, for want of a better word, later sell out the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army guys. In October 19, so it reads, in October 1945, delegates from across the world descended on a town hall on the outskirts of Manchester city centre, being in England, mid-England, to attend a seismic event in African politics, the ripple effect of which still resonates 80 years later, titled the Pan-African Congress, held between 15 and the 21st of October 1945, was a key moment for the movement of a movement that liberated many Africans from colonial rule. Amongst those who attended were Obafemi Awolowo, one of the driving forces, of Nigerian independence, feminist and human rights campaigner Amy Ashwood Garvey, someone we've talked about on women and resistance. If you go back into the catalog, you could see that. Trinidadian radical George Padmore, and the future presidents of Malawi, Ghana, and Kenya, Hastings Banda, Kwame Nkrumah, and Jomo Kenyatta. You've both read this article. What was your take on it? And the fact, do we have any lessons that we could pull from that conference that should resonate now? Because we're told the effect still resonates 80 years later.
Yes, let Sister go first.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Okay, I will go.
Maybe, yeah, please.
What was amazing about the fifth Pan-African Congress was that it was, I think it was more inclusive than the first ones, in the sense that it was not as elitist. There were more quote unquote commoners involved. So there were definitely trade unionists that were part of it. There were women activists that were part of it. And those of you who've been listening to Women in Resistance, we've covered some women who were able to attend this as well. Of course, we had radical intellectuals. We covered Amy Ashwood Garvey, who was a part of this as well. And of course, the great W.E.B. Du Bois, who had attended all of them. I think he was the one who was at every single one of them.
Yeah.
But I think that this one was definitely a pivot from just protest to actually power. Like this was one that was, okay, here's a blueprint for our actual decolonization.
Yeah.
What I see though from this is that, as you can see, that many of the individuals who attended this went on to quote unquote lead the independence movement in Africa, and certainly played roles in the United States as well, and in the Caribbean too. But it looks like we figured out how to agitate for and gain political power, but not economic power. So, and then also looks like we figured out how to institutionalize Pan-Africanism. But maybe we lost the revolutionary spirit a little bit. Correct. Because these revolutionaries who were on the streets doing the things, all of that suddenly became part of the status quo. Yeah. So now they're the ones heading the government. They're the ones basically telling the students, calm down, or we got to do things a certain way. They're the ones in charge of the government apparatus, and it changes things. And so you see that the complexities in terms of how Kenyatta and Banda, who were once radicals, now all of a sudden become like authoritarians in how they're governing, right?
Correct.
Or you look at Awolowo, who was this visionary who is kind of constrained in the way that he governs and how he sees Nigeria's role, even in terms of the idea of a United States of Africa. And so looking at 1945 and lessons learned in 2025, 80 years later, political independence achieved, but certainly economic independence unfulfilled. We remain export dependent. Racial equality is definitely incomplete. We're still dealing with absolute systemic racism globally. There's not a place on the globe where we're not dealing with systemic racism.
Heightened gender violence.
Our peace and sovereignty still undermined by coups and external interventions. We're still very much saddled by debt, maybe even more so. Women are still very much, not part of the equation in the way that we should. Patriarchy, even now more so, seems to have a strong stranglehold. Yes, Africa has had more presidents than, of course, the United States, which has had none. But when you look at overall the role of African women, certainly compared to pre-colonial times, we are not doing much better. So am I excited about what I'm seeing amongst our youth? Yes. Do I feel like they're undergirded by the same kind of intellectual curiosity? Perhaps not as much. Is that good or bad? It depends, because part of our education also made us wedded to Western ideology, which was a problem for us, has been a problem for us. But at the same time, you also don't want people who are just passionate but don't have a guiding ideology either. And so what are we organizing around? So the Manchester Congress, definitely not just a historical meeting. It continues to reverberate today, but we still need to examine the lessons from it and how we are going to apply it to today. And I wish that it wasn't sold out. I did try to sign up for the event because they have a virtual component, I guess. But I'm on the wait list, so we'll see, because it's November 3rd, I believe. That's the second part of it that they're having.
Correct. Yeah. Comrade?
Yeah, I think Sister actually touched on all the key points that I would have wanted to touch on also. every aspect. I would just add perhaps that it just shows how Amy Ashwood Garvey is underestimated. You know, she was, she was a major intellectual in her own right. You know, she was the co-founder, together with Garvey, of Negro World, and she proved that she was an independent intellectual because they got divorced very early. I think in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And yet she remained relevant for many decades. I don't think Garvey ever set foot on the continent, but she did. She went to a number of African countries. She was in Liberia. She went to Nigeria. She made contacts there. When she was in England, she worked with Nigerians to form student movements, to raise funds. This woman was just phenomenal, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think this article, even though it mentioned she was only one or two women that spoke, and sort of did mention her a few times, but not sufficiently. She was really a dynamic heavyweight. And so Sister touched on how many of these emerging leaders turned. I would also want to know that. In fact, and you know, sometimes when you read stuff like that, you hear somebody speaking, so as I'm listening to you speak, then my journalistic instincts are lighting up. And I'm wondering, what sort of deal did imperialism make with Banda, Kamuzu Banda, and what sort of deal did they make with Jomo Kenyatta? And, you know, are these somewhere in their archives? I mean, by now they would have been opened up, and it could be there. It just could be that nobody has been looking for that particular type of information, because they definitely made deals. But otherwise, all of them would have turned out to be like Kwame Nkrumah, and I'm sure they have documentation of trying to make deals with Nkrumah and Nkrumah refusing, you know?
Yeah, funny enough, you
and then in terms of, sorry?
Go on. Finish your thought.
Yeah, so in terms of the ideology for young people, I think since, you know, sometimes ideology tends to become a bit thick. So I think for our young people, I would keep it simple for them. I would say just pursue the Thomas Sankara ideology. And that is why Traore is very popular right now, because it keeps invoking Thomas Sankara. So if we break it to them that way, they can embrace it. And Sankara, of course, wanted the United States of Africa. Sankara wanted Africa's market to be reserved for Africa. He wanted Africans to produce what they consume and consume only what they produce. So I think that's what we should promote to our young people.
I just like to add the key part there, which is it was called the Pan-Africanist Congress for a reason. This idea was that Africans could do for self what they wanted, regardless of, you know, external import. And the understanding of how powerful that idea was is documented by W.B. Du Bois in his book, The World and Africa. You said earlier that he was the one person that attended all the five. In fact, he said in his book there that from the first one up to the last one, it was made difficult for the delegates to travel by the countries where they are.
Yes.
And the reason is simple. We cannot possibly allow these people to come together. But when they did and they got in power, did you think they stopped? Your guess is as good as mine. They didn't. And how did we know that? There was a book that came out in 2022, which is White Malice by Susan Williams, where she talked about how the CIA went after all of these leaders simply because you were, quote unquote, pro people. No, you have to do our bidding. So they started with the gentleman in Congo, Patrice Lumumba, walked their way through West Africa, Modibo Keita, Silvio Olympio, Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral, Mondale in Mozambique, Samora Machel, and even up to recently, Thomas Sankara. And they have not stopped. So again, like the good comrade said, yeah, follow Sankara, understand, you can read Sankara Speaks. In there, all his speeches are there. His ideology is down there. The kind of books he read is also in there. So that way you could have a concrete idea of what he envisioned for Africa. And that could be a working ideology. And so, yeah, that said, we've come to the end of another episode of African News Review. And yeah, the time flies when we're having fun. But that's it. Any final thoughts, comrade?
Aluta continua. I mean, we are witnessing, this is a revolution. A revolution is ongoing. A revolution, as Malcolm said, I think was it a message to the grassroots. He said, many of us, we can't stomach a revolution. A revolution is not really peaceful. It's turbulent. It's messy. It's unpleasant. But, it's transition. And it's amazing that, so, Malcolm, because it's impossible for anybody to transition that quickly, right? From the Malcolm from 64 to 65, the year he was expelled from the Nation of Islam. So in March, he's out. By February, by the time Malcolm is killed, he's talking about class struggle, about capitalism, about exploitation of laborers. I don't believe anybody can learn all of that within less than a 1 year period. I think even when Malcolm was adhering to the rhetoric of the Nation of Islam, blue-eyed devils and all that, Malcolm was already actually studying, political economy.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes. And he said it. He said, listen, revolution is bloody, but at the end, that's how transition occurs. He discussed China, and at that time, China was revolutionary, but China was not even an industrial power yet. Imagine. He could see all of that. So I say all this suggests that Africa right now is going through that type of transition. And once we have people who are in control of our natural resources, I think it's a matter of 15 years to 20 years before our economies are transformed. So those are my final words for today.
Sister?
I believe John Henry Clark said that education, the purpose of education is to teach us how to use power. And we saw Mark Rubio, whatever his name is called, Secretary of State for the United States of America, I'm assuming under the directive of the felon-in-chief, wield their power this past week against Wole Soyinka, Nobel laureate from Nigeria, when they decided to revoke his visa. I really appreciated our elder's response, which was like a very polite F you and your visa. Because he tongue in cheek was like, I was paying you a compliment when I said you were the white Idi Amin or whatever he said. But what I took from that is other people pay attention to what people say and do, and they use their power accordingly to reward or punish people based on whether they are doing things that benefit or hurt them from their worldview.
Correct.
You can agree with their worldview or not, but from their lens, okay, you are hurting me, you are on my side, I'm going to wield my power to either
cut you short.
Yes, acknowledge, thank you for being my ally, or hey, you're my enemy and I'm going to cut you at the knees. People of African descent often are not studying those who are our sworn enemies. And even when we realize that they are, we are still appealing to their better senses. We are still dancing around with fire. We are still welcoming them into our bosoms. We are still hoping against hope that we are going to somehow, today, they cut us every time we hug them, but today it will be different. And I would just like us to start wielding power differently and not to become like our enemies, but to love ourselves enough to start taking care of ourselves.
Yep.
Because
that's the key thing. We have to love ourselves.
If these people can come in and murder pregnant women, newborn babies, children in incubators, damn it, we need to start operating differently. We need to start wielding power differently.
Yeah, I would just like to pay homage to the last month we had. We lost. October, to me, is fast becoming the month of the martyrs. We lost Samara Machel, October 19, 1986. We lost Thomas Sankara, October 15, 1987. We lost Maurice Bishop, October 19, 1983. All in October. So I think it's a testament to our fight that these three gentlemen went in October and they all died fighting imperialism. So people, we need to read. There is no shortcut to understanding how to fight against your enemy, except study your enemy. And I don't want to quote Che Guevara, said you have to be ready. You have to study your enemy because your enemy is studying you. And what else is there to say? So until next week, it's good night and God bless.